is Tash, and I am the program director with No More Under. We are a nonprofit based in Bellevue, Washington, supporting water safety awareness and trying to reduce drowning, because drowning is a preventable death. We have been doing a Learn More series where we're trying to explore various elements of swimming and water safety. We've done a conversation about bath safety. We've done Black History Month and highlighted some amazing Black swimming Olympic swimming medalists from the US. We've done Women's History Month, where we had an ultra marathon swimmer join us, and now today we have Stacey, who is joining us as we honor April, which is Autism Awareness Month. And Stacey is the president of the Autism Society of Florida, amongst many other things. I was chatting with Stacey briefly yesterday, and I learned that she wears about 8 different and extremely impactful and critical hats. So we're very lucky to get a quick little bit of Stacey's time. So Stacey, thank you so much for joining us. And I would love for you to share, as we get into it, a little bit about the Autism Society of Florida, you know, the history there, your involvement with it, and just anything else you'd like to share as we get going.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. We, are doing our best in April, which is like, it's been a crazy month for us because we just have, it's like a good, bad thing, right? It's like we have so many people now. I have a 27-year-old who has autism, and that we have so many people now that are organizations that are just contacting us saying, oh, it's April, and I understand it's Autism Awareness Month, and what can we do together? So that's been a really beautiful part of this month. However, my organization, the Autism Society of Florida, which is an affiliate of the National Autism Society of America, we are 100% volunteers. So that means we don't have any paid staff. I have a board of 16 people, and Florida's a pretty big state. And so we have people on the board from all the way over to from the Panhandle, kind of close to New Orleans, all the way down into Key West. And so we are kind of spread out because, we really think it's important to make sure that we have representation of not only the different geographical parts of our state, but also the diverse, just really the diversity of our state. So whether it's rural or urban, ethnicity, gender, everything. And so we really do sit and take very careful examination of the representation, because we want our board to represent our population. And as we all know, everybody can have autism. It's not just a one color or one financial. Used to be, oh, well, it's the wealthier kids. I don't really know where that came from. But, so we definitely want to make sure that we cover everybody so that we represent everybody. We do a lot of water safety, and we've been really busy this year. And as I'm hoping you guys know, next month is, we're really going to be looking, because it's Water Safety Month is in the month of May. So it's been really nice. April kind of falls into May, so we meld sort of our things together. One of the other things that we spend a lot of time doing is law enforcement training. So first responders. It could be firemen, it could be police, it could be emergency room staff, because that was like another huge issue that we came across a couple of years ago, and that people with autism who have to go to the emergency room sometimes, and the emergency room staff doesn't understand when you have a potentially 200-pound man who can't verbally communicate and doesn't understand why you want to stick this needle in his arm. And we found that a lot of the staff in those rooms were resistant. And so they ended up not getting the medical care that they should have, because the people in the room didn't understand. So we spend a lot of time training them as well. When it comes to water safety, we don't only speak at conferences, but we train water safety instructors about how to teach kids with autism how to swim, because that can be tricky sometimes. And then we also provide scholarships because we have a lot of families that they wouldn't be able to afford it. And when we first started getting into that part of it, like raising the dollars to be able to provide the swimming lessons, I have a friend of mine who actually coordinated a conference yesterday. She lost a child to drowning more than a decade ago, and she has a foundation. She's very passionate, and I mean, it's how a lot of people get started, right? I mean, I'm an advocate because my son has autism, so we kind of get wrapped up into that and want to see other people come out feeling supported, right? And so being able to assist individuals that need it when they need it most. And I met with, so Casey is her name. She kind of called a bunch of water safety instructors together because I had questions. This was at my beginning of getting into this. And I asked them a bunch of questions about, what do you do? How do you know how to teach these kids and what happens? But the other thing I wanted to know was, how much more expensive can it be? Because, a lot of families, kids with autism, that kid might not be able to get into a pool with 10 kids even, let alone 100 kids in a pool getting a swimming lesson, which in some areas of this country, that's the norm, right? They got these big summer swim programs. You got 100 kids, 200 kids in a big, big pool. And bad things can happen in that situation as well if there's not enough support. But our kids, they could be very easily overwhelmed, and it's just not a good situation. So I also wanted to know from them, like, financially, how much is it going to take in order to give that kid either a one-on-one lesson or a really small group? And that's how we kind of figured out, okay, what do we need to do when it comes to the scholarships? Because every kid is different. And some kids can handle a pool of 100 kids in it, but some kids cannot. And we found that the kid who cannot is actually in a lot more danger to wander from safety and end up in a very traumatic, if not deadly situation. So we want to make sure that we do as much as we can for the kids who couldn't get in a pool of 200 kids. However, we do provide some swim scholarships to some swim, to some swim programs who may be struggling a little bit, and they want to be able to service more kids with autism, and just for one reason or another, if they can't. And we use a lot of recommendations with that because, everybody would want our money. And so we do go and we tap into some people like Florida. We have something called Water Smart Florida. And those are people who are really the movers and shakers of drowning prevention. And so I might give them a call and say, hey, what do you know about this pool? Or who do you think would be a really good pool for us to give to make sure that the dollars are actually going to go where we want them to go. And then advocacy, we do a lot of legislative advocacy. We were able to move 2 bills through the Florida legislature last year. And right now, because our session begins usually in January, sometimes it'll end up in February, but it's 60 days. So in our state, they do meet every year, the legislators, and they have 60 days to basically balance the budget. A lot of people who don't understand state legislatures, that's really what they're doing. Yeah, they're looking at bills, but they got to balance the state budget. And so now is the time that we're getting started in, all right, what are we going to look at for drowning prevention? And we are also fortunate in that Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is a mover and shaker in Washington when it comes to drowning prevention, she's actually mine. She's my congresswoman. And so we have her from the state of Florida. And when it comes to that, she's really in it. And just like with any legislator, though, it's us on the ground, citizens, who really need to go to whether it's our member of Congress or the Senate or your local states to let them know what you need, because they get people yelling at them for all kinds of stuff. And if our voices aren't part of the conversation, then we kind of got ourselves to blame, because if we want things to happen, you got to get in there. You got to inform them about situations, and especially those who are listening here who have personal experiences. One of the hats I wear is I'm the coordinator of something called Partners in Policymaking, and that's what it's all about. It's about influencing policymakers. And I always tell my class, I can, as acting as an advocate, I can go in and I can give data and statistics, and I can say all that stuff that's, important, I guess, but it's the stories. It's the personal stories of what families have to say, or even the individual, maybe the one who was a kid is now an adult, but to go in and be able to say, this is what happened to me. This is what happened to my family. And this is why I need you to represent us in making good decisions for our nation, so that other families aren't going to have to go through what I have.
And Stacey, I'm curious, because I have to admit I've been doing drowning prevention, for the past 3 years, but I didn't realize until recently the high number of autistic children that drown in comparison. And I'm just curious, why is that? I mean, I see the statistic and I understand there's curiosity, but I mean, it's like, what's the statistic? It's like 160 times more.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just based on what we know, because I go back to the age of diagnosis. So now I do think that there are some areas where doctors are catching them younger than 4.5, but the CDC, their own report still is saying 4.5 on average in this country. So we'll just go with that. So if we go with that, how many of these young children drown? And we had no idea. And I actually brought that up at a conference I was attending yesterday. And the woman who was speaking at the time, she said to me, that is something I never thought about. And she's a researcher. And she said, I never thought about that. And she asked me, like, what kind of questions should they be asking? And I said, well, you don't have to, because, parents are already going through a horrific event. So you don't have to bring up, autism, but maybe talk to them about, did you notice any type of delays? And then maybe mention some of those early signs in autism, even if we could just start capturing more information, because I countless parents that I have talked to in the water safety journey that have lost children, and I'll be talking about autism. Just, I don't know what autism is, and I can tell by their face. They'll say, "Can you just describe a little bit more, like in a 2.5-year-old, like what are some of the things you might see?" And that to me is, their wheels are turning. They're thinking that they've seen these things. So then I'll start explaining it in as soft a way as I can, because I know what may be coming. And so I'll do that. And I can't tell you the number of parents I've had who just have that aha moment, and they're like, I think that was my daughter. I think that was my son. And, I don't think I know a parent of a kid with autism who won't tell you that they love the water. I mean, even as an advocate, I have teachers that say all the time, they can't keep the kid out of the sink at the back of the room. They're always turning the sink on, playing in the water. And some kids putting their hands in the toilet bowl, younger kids, because, they're young and water is splashy and it does that thing. And so there's that. And then a body of water, a lot of times parents think, well, I have a fence, I have a gate, I have whatever around my backyard pool. But if they do not have locks on doors, kids that I know, they don't care if it's their backyard pool, if it's the neighbor's pool. It doesn't cross their mind necessarily that, this is somebody else's yard. Yeah. And it's not a good idea for me to go get in their pool. And it's interesting because we teach kids, we don't go in the pool with our clothes on. So we're going to change, or we're going to do whatever. And kids act like neighbors calling and saying, there's a naked child in my pool. They'll call 911. There's a naked child in my pool, because they took their clothes off, because in their minds, I can't take my clothes off. I can't swim with my clothes on. And so that just really goes to show that we teach kids those rules without teaching them the 10 steps ahead rule. Yeah. That, and so there are some things that we can do. And when we train parents, we talk about some of those things that we could do to kind of help them understand that there are rules of water play and getting in water. And of course, those are the lucky situations where when the kid jumps in the neighbor's pool, the kid can swim. But imagine the kid jumping in a pool and cannot. And I had my older son was, he was keeping an eye on my kids are both adults. And so my older son had a kid over at the house who has autism. He was probably oh, I don't know, he's about 5 at the time. And I have a pool and they were going to go swimming. So he brought him in, they went in the backyard and I was standing, well, we were both out there. So we were both out there. The little one was out there. He was just like so excited. And I said to my son, can he swim? And he's like, his mom said, and he didn't even get the sentence out. Kid beeline, boop, in the pool. He could not swim. He could not swim at all. And he had not one inkling of fear or knowledge of what was going to be happening to him had we not been able to scoop him right out of the water. And so that summer he got swimming lessons and he's a really good swimmer now. But there was just no fear. And this kid is like a super smart. I mean, he was just amazing. He knew so much information about so many things. So I think that a lot of parents think, well, you know, my kid can read or my kid can, I don't know, do this or do that. And they're so smart. They have all this information in their head. So they'll be fine in the water. And that's not necessarily true. So those door alarms are really important, swimming lessons. And, you know, we do need laws. We need laws to support and encourage safe water. However, just like we recently heard from Dr. Hoffman from the American Academy of Pediatrics, children who die in car accidents, 40% of them are unrestrained. They're not in a car seat, and we have car seat laws. So we do need laws, but we also need all of those other ways to make sure that our children don't end up a horrifying statistic.
And what are the signs? Sorry, Tosh, I don't want to jump in too much, but what are some of the signs that parents should look out for? Like, I know for sure someone on here has like a young baby. So what are the things to look for, to identify autism?
Well, I mean, there are different things. So for instance, my son was one of those kids who developed pretty typically. I mean, in video, he looked pretty good. I mean, he was looking at me, he was engaged with me. He would, one of the first things that babies say is, uh-oh, right? They pick something up and they drop it because, we do that. So we go, uh-oh, and then they pick it up, right? So I have video of him saying, uh-oh, and mama, and dada, and he had about 10 words. And then one by one, those words fell away. And so that was about 15 months. And I knew that something was happening. He's my second son. So I had, and they're pretty close. They're 19 months apart. So they're pretty close together. So it wasn't that long since the other one. And I'm like, something's up. He's not using those words anymore. And so went to his pediatrician. And I said, he's not talking like he was. And that was, probably around 16 or 18 months that I said that. Oh, no, Stacey, don't worry about it. Look at him. He's the picture of health. He's got great height, great weight. He's just a little delayed. It's going to be okay. I don't know. So, okay, I just leave that alone. And then, which is, that is fairly common in autism, that the child seems to develop so-called normally, developmentally, and then they start to lose just these little things. So if anybody sees your kid losing these little things, learn from me and don't give it time, because that's what I was told, give it time. So don't do that. But I did, I gave it time. And then what started happening is he stopped doing what's called joint attention. So when little ones, typically developing toddlers, when they play, they're looking at you. They want to see your response. They want to share with you. If they drop something and they say, uh-oh, they're going to look up at you because they want to see, how are you responding to what's happening? And children with autism tend to lose that. If they ever had it, they tend to lose that. And it could literally be night and day. And that's really what happened to my son. It's just that we actually thought he had become deaf, that he lost his hearing. Wow. He had a grandmother who has since passed away who was deaf. And we thought, well, maybe that's it. Maybe it's congenital. We're not really sure. But he could be at the other side of the house. And if Thomas the Tank Engine came on the TV, whoop, there he was in front of the TV. That was it. And so we thought, okay, no, he can hear pretty good. So it wasn't that. He just started taking like his Thomas the Tank Engine trains and flipping them over and spinning wheels, which is a very common trait in autism. So it's not that they don't play with toys, it's that they play with toys not in the manner that they were intended to play. So if you've got kids and they're spinning wheels or they're lining things up, a lot of kids like to line things up. One of my best friends, her son was 2, and he was starting to read. And there's something that they like to give a name for that, hyperlexia. And that, in the beginning, it was like, this is so amazing. He's 2 years old and he's reading. And she thought that was so great. And so it was great. It's not that it isn't great. He didn't understand anything that he was reading. And as he would kind of move into reading, the world just kind of disappeared for him. He was no longer interested in humans. He wanted to just sit with books and really absorb as much information that he could. I mean, he's an adult now. He's got an incredible amount of information stored in his mind. But, you know, if you look at like the diagnosis, like what doctors go by, they are going to look for eye contact. But I will tell you, I know a lot of people with autism who have good eye contact. So do not use that one alone. But eye contact, you know, lack of sharing. So if a plane goes over, mommy, you know, they want to show you. If they're not showing you, and for the really young ones, there are some researchers that are looking at really young, like 1 and under. And the first sign that they're seeing is a failure to have a shared social smile. Because like when we look at our babies, we smile, right? We smile, we want them to smile and get all excited when they smile for the first time. Sometimes these kids, they're just not. They might smile about a rattle, but they're not giving you that face-to-face kind of smile. And so if any of those things or anything that anybody notices, talk to your doctors. And if they say, give it time, ask for a second opinion. And maybe it is just a little bit of a delay blip, and there's no harm at all if you go and you start getting some interventions, like, I don't know, let's say speech therapy, because your kid isn't really saying anything. So go get speech therapy. And if it really is nothing but a mild developmental delay, in a year's time, they'll be speaking. And so you can pat yourself on the back and go, that was good. I used the year. But if you don't use the year and you keep listening to these people who say, give it time, it's your child's time that you're losing. So just don't go by these doctors who are practicing medicine. Yeah. I always tell that, they're practicing. So you don't know everything.
That's super powerful. Thank you for sharing that. It's so important to hear we're learning, Shades and I learning, and it's just awesome to hear your knowledge and your experiences too, because you've clearly had this firsthand, and it's so powerful. If you don't mind me asking, what age was your son when he started lessons, or was he interested in the water?
Oh yeah, well, I have kind of a different sort of story when it comes to water, because we had a boat before we had children. So because of that, the first one was on the boat at less than 6 months old with a life jacket, right? Because you have to have a life jacket on in the boat. And so soon as they could, I think they were probably around a little bit more than 1. We've always had them in the water, but it was probably when they were 1 and maybe even 18 months old when we started to get like lessons. And so yes, he was extremely drawn to water. I mean, when we were on the boat, of course, which everybody should have a life jacket on their children on a boat. That's
yes.
A no-brainer.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't think that something can happen to you. So you hit your head, you fall, you whatever, your kid's gonna be there. They have to have a life jacket on. So it's not just about if he or she jumps overboard, but what if something happens to you? And there's that little peanut there, potentially unsafe. But he would stand at the back of the boat. And I remember from the time he could stand, so like a year old, he would pick up, okay, so here's my glasses. He would literally pick up whatever he could and just drop it off the back of the boat, because what he wanted is he wanted to see the water go right? Because it does that splashy thing. And I mean, he was doing what's called self-stimulatory behavior. And so some kids, we call it stim. So some kids do that kind of stim where they just like to see things hit the water because the water reacts like nothing else reacts. And it's like, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It does that thing. And I don't see anything else do that. And it's just cool. And, so he always had lessons. And so by the time that he could actually run to jump in water, he already knew how to swim to get to the side. And then we had a horrific event, and I don't know if anybody in here heard about it because it did make national news. When it was a couple months into the COVID lockdown, I want to say it was May-ish of 2020. And in Miami, a mom who was basically desperate because she had no support to raise a very complex young man. I think he was 15. She led him to water and he drowned.
Autistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm in no way, shape, or form on her side at all for what happened. I mean, she killed her son. But when you look to see what was happening in her life, you can definitely see the desperation. But if that young man had had swimming lessons, he would still be with us today.
Well, and I actually have two questions for you. One is, with that statistic of 160 times likely, is it still that 1 to 4 age group, or is it beyond? Like, what are the ages? Is it age specific as far as autism drowning?
No, it's not the 1 to 4. It's children, so it would be 18 and younger.
Okay.
And again, though, that's why we always say that it's a very conservative number, because all those kids that just didn't get identified. That's and right. Especially when you're talking like in the 2s, because my son was like I said, I had questioned every time something came up. I was back at the doctor saying, what about this? What about that? What about, oh, no. And then it really took a friend of mine who was a principal at an elementary school, who was over for dinner, and she's watching him. She calls me the next day and she's like, something's up with him. And I go, yes, I know. And I keep bringing it up. And the doctor says he's fine. And she's like, well, I think you need another opinion. And what happened next was very sad. I liked my pediatrician, so I didn't have anything against him to that point. And when I went back in and I told him what she said, he said, educators should stick to education and stay out of medicine. And I said, well, I need another person in medicine to tell me what I need to do or what's up. And within 5 minutes in the neurologist's office, he was not, like today we see these individuals with autism that are, highly verbal, that it might be a little tricky to identify. That's not who my son was. He was almost 2.5 years old, not one word. He couldn't imitate a sound. He would pace back and forth. He would line things up. All those things I told you about, that the first signs, they have a tendency to get bigger and bigger and bigger if they're not addressed. And so that's what it basically had taken over his life. And so it didn't take long in a neurologist's office. We had a diagnosis, and then we got to work, because that's me, right? So that's me. So once I knew what I was dealing with, I was like, okay, time to change things up. Now that was, he was born in 95. So that was probably like 97, 98, something like that, 98, I guess. So there wasn't any Wi-Fi or YouTube or any of that stuff back then. So it was the TV. So the TV and all the videos and all that stuff off. And we basically got in his face, and we played and we played and we played. I hired teacher's aides, because we got him into a preschool. We got teacher's aides who would come to my house, and he was constantly engaged, constantly. And, you hear a lot of differing opinions on something called ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. And I didn't hire anybody, because like some people will say, oh, well, it's punitive. And, there's a lot of people with autism who are very much against it. But I think that when you do interventions correctly, you're going from the interests of the child. And so he would go in the backyard on the swing, and he was not going to get pushed until he looked up at her. He couldn't say push at the beginning. So it might just be looking at her. And then once he did, then she would say, I love the way you're looking at me. That's awesome. And he would get pushed.
Yeah.
And so, that's how he had to learn a lot of things. And, we did a lot. And today he's a college graduate. So it can happen.
Well, and this leads into the second question I had, in understanding that autistic children do learn differently. So how would one find swim lessons? Because the typical swim lesson is not necessarily going to work for them. And I feel like Tasha said that as well, that some of her friends that are instructors have had really amazing, like that's been their, what did you say? Like most rewarding work, right?
Yeah, some of mine. I was an instructor for 6 years, and my two favorite like memories that give me goosebumps, and the memories I hold most dear to my heart were with children that had autism. And one of them, I still remember his name. I won't say it, but I know his name, like it comes to the top of my head. And this was 6 years ago now. And he was 9 and nonverbal, completely nonverbal. And it was so beautiful to learn for me how to serve him best. And we went from, as we've mentioned, a lot of children are attracted to the water, but this specific swimmer that I had, he was quite fearful of it. And the sensory overload was very overwhelming. So it can definitely go either way, but certainly you can see the beauty and attraction of water for sure. But this specific young boy was very apprehensive and it was overwhelming. And so we did do one-on-ones in a really quiet area. But again, that comes down to the family. They had the ability to do that, and we had the choice to go to a quiet pool. And there's so many factors, but it was just a beautiful experience. And by the end of working with this swimmer and one other, they were both swimming independently across the pool. And the parents are crying, I'm crying. The swimmer is super pumped and playing safely in the water. But it took I wasn't trained in that. And I'm thankful I had those experiences, because I learned on the go, and it was so eye-opening and powerful for me. However, not every instructor has the opportunity to have that one-on-one that I was lucky to have in the space with these swimmers. So how can we, like Shazia said, how do we spread the knowledge of working with these children who might respond differently to the regular groups of 3 that I used to work with,
No, I mean, if a family is looking for lessons, the first place I would call it is the Department of Health. So we have state Department of Health. We also have county, district, municipality departments of health, because those are the entities that report nationally on drowning and drowning prevention, and the pathway that they're taking as a locality and as a state on how, because every state has a goal to reduce childhood drowning, everyone. And so they all have to report. So I would be asking them first, okay, so this is the child that we're talking about, describe a little bit. And, where do I go? What do I do? Now, if they don't have the exact answer, they should be able to make some recommendations on some pools that they know that are like local pools, municipality type of pools. And a lot of times those people are the best people to ask, because they're on the ground. So let's even say it's a YMCA pool. So YMCA pool might say, oh yeah, we really don't have that. If it were me, I would advocate with my YMCA and say, do you know how many kids in this area could use this? And aren't you guys charged with, saving children's lives? So I would kind of, push the Y a little bit to do that. But if they say that they don't, or they won't, or whatever, then I would say to them, okay, so what can you recommend for me? Because I have this kid and it's really challenging. They're not going to be able to be in a pool of a bunch of kids. And so a lot of times those are the Department of Health and the YMCA are going to be your first. Now, also the Red Cross, our Red Cross and their access to somebody who has knowledge about your area, though, can not be, efficient or sufficient. So that's why I tend to start with the Department of Health first, because those people should be on the ground in your area. And so you could start with them. And then, there's some, like in my state, there's 2 right now, departments of health, both my county where I live in Broward, and then on our West Coast, where the Department of Health works with something called the Children's Services Council, and they have created a voucher program that kids, even the kids at the younger grades, and for kids with autism all the way up to 5th grade, where they literally get on a school bus and they get taken to a pool and they get lessons. So it's not even mom and dad having to do that. So again, that can be done. There's already models for it. It would just require some advocacy, talking to county commissioners. Oh yeah, I know, honey. County commissioners. But okay, so my day job as an educational advocate, I work for an agency that does free advocacy, but we are funded by Broward County government, which means I can't do that outside of my county. My administrator many years ago, probably 30 years ago, she has a son with autism, and she saw that, low-income families can't afford an advocate because they're just too darn expensive. So she went to the county commissioners and she said, we're leaving out a large population of people, and they shouldn't have any less access to a good education as a kid who can afford an advocate. And she advocated and she got it. And so they've been funding this organization for like about 30 years. And so I think that people underestimate their ability to be successful when it comes to getting services and programs. Because again, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I would go and I would say, hey, do you know down there in South Florida, they have this thing over there where they pay for this voucher. It's just called a voucher, and it pays for swimming lessons. And the nice thing about that is that when they go, my issue with it, I wish it was like a little bit longer. I would have it go for like 2 months instead of just a couple of weeks. But the nice thing about it is it takes kids that are in special programs. So these are our kids with some pretty heavy duty needs. And it takes them with their teacher, with their paraprofessionals. So the people who already know this kid, they already know them and what makes them tick and what sets them off. So they're there with them. So there's beauty in that. That way, if the instructor is like, I don't really know, the staff is there to do that. So that can happen, because you know what? I mean, I'm in Florida. We don't even have a state income tax. We have very low taxes here. So if we can make it happen here, yeah, it can happen anywhere. And it's about priorities and what your area finds as a priority to the people who live there.
Yeah. And I guess, in particular here, same, we don't have state tax and we are surrounded by water. There's so much open water here. I apologize because I feel like I am so hungry for this. So I keep
it's awesome. Keep going. I should pin you so that you're part of the main conversation here.
No, so I am curious, Stacey, like if you had, I have my magic wand that if I could wave, this would be the thing for swimming. And Tosh has her magic wand that, like her wish. If you had a wish around, swimming and autism, what would that wish be? Other than reducing the statistics, because obviously we've got to do something about that.
Just making sure that everyone has access to swimming lessons, no matter what they can afford, what they can't afford, how old they are, what their gender is, what their ethnicity is, what their geographic location is, all that other stuff, but making it accessible to everybody. And being accessible, I mean accessible to that individual. So again, if that means 2 kids in the pool, then that means 2 kids in the pool. It's kind of like in Florida, we have something called school choice, right? So you get to use the dollars. If you don't like your school, the dollar follows the student. That's what we have. So you could choose a private school, dollars follow your student. You're the parent, you're going to decide where you're going to send your kid. So I would love a similar situation set up for drowning prevention, and that, you get a certain pocket of money, and you as the parent to go kind of find, which program is going to be the one for you. And in the school system, it's not that every kid gets the same amount of money. So if you're a high need kid, you're going to get, we have something called a matrix. So you're going to get more money than your average, just easygoing, middle of the road kind of kid. And so being able to have something set up like that, I think that would be it. Because like I said before, it's really, swimming lessons is not the only answer for sure, but it is one that I think I think the statistic that we tend to hear is 88%. It's 88% effective. So it's not 100. So those alarms on doors, some families, maybe have the, not gonna remember what it's called, but it's like that floating thing in the pool. So when the pool gets disturbed, the alarm goes off, and they're super loud. I saw yesterday somebody was showing, it looked like a watch, and she dropped it in a pitcher of water. It was like about this big, and she dropped it in, and on the table was it had a flashing light, and it was a very loud alarm. And so that a kid could wear the watch, and if they hit the water, the alarm went off in the house. I'd never seen that one before, so that was kind of interesting. But I wouldn't even want that. I'd want alarms on my doors. And so we need that. We need legislation because we want our nation to take this more seriously, the way that Australia does. I mean, Australia has done an amazing job with reducing drowning. And so if they can do it, well, hello, let's get with the program. So we could do it. I don't think, sadly, that we're ever going to be able to say that we, have 100%, because there are so many factors. It's not just the got out of the house. It's not just the couldn't swim. I mean, there's plenty of kids who can swim, but don't survive. I mean, I have, like my son, yeah, he has autism, but he also has seizures. A minute in a pool without anybody watching him could be his last minute.
And is this the same thing with bathtubs? Because I know that there's a thing with the seizures in the bathtubs, right? And is this where the autism thing also correlates?
Well, yes and no. I mean, nobody should leave their children in a bathtub without watching them, right? Yeah. So, but even for adults, so if there isn't, and it doesn't matter who you are, but if you have ever had a seizure before, you need to, in my opinion, take a shower and try to stay away from a bathtub. Because when you, and let me just also add, because my son didn't start having seizures till he was 16 was his first one. So a lot of people, including myself, thought, oh, no, it wasn't a seizure. He doesn't have seizures. That's no. So they didn't start until then. And he is an incredible swimmer. An absolutely incredible swimmer. He's very fluid in the water. He has no fear, which is another component for him. And it's really, I think, part of why he's such a great swimmer. Because I know for me, we live a little, not too far from the beach. If I'm in the ocean, I'm always thinking there's a shark. There's a shark. It's going to come and it's going to get me, or a man of war or something is going to sting me, bite me, do something to me. And so it causes me to think twice about where I'm going to move to and what I'm going to do. But when you don't have that level of fear and you're just swimming for the sake of the beauty and the enjoyment of swimming, you could be a pretty amazing swimmer. So he is. But when he's in the water, there always has to be not only a water watcher, but I literally have to I have to be in the water with my eyes on him. And he's fortunate in that he has about 10 to 20 seconds. So he knows it's coming. So there are certain precautions and things that we've done. But in my research, when he started having seizures, 1% of humans have at least one seizure in their life. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. And it may just be a small one, may come and go, and you're like, what was that? That's like, I checked out. And so some of us, we don't even realize it was a seizure. It was because it just came and it went, and then that's it. You never have another one again. But because of that, that's another thing. How do we know that these kids didn't have a seizure in the water? And, you know, at that conference in Texas, we heard from a mom whose daughter drowned during a swimming lesson. And those happen too. I was actually talking to a group yesterday about that, and they were like, yeah, you know, when there's a lot of kids in the water, when everybody's not being monitored, if that child had a seizure, that's something. And there's no test. Like after my son had his first seizure, and we were like, what? No, you know, they took him, 911 was called, took him to the hospital. There's no test. They can't. It's not like, you know, if you have a heart attack, they check your enzymes and they go, oh yeah, you just had a heart attack. There's nothing. It's a guess. And so that's something else, that if anybody out there has a kid who has had a seizure, you really need to watch them around the water. And my opinion would be that they need to have a vest on, a life vest on. There are also these really cool ones that are like not inflated, and you pull this little thingy and they inflate. So if you are in the water swimming with other people, and if you get that aura, it's called an aura, and you feel it, pop that thing and you'll be okay. But yeah, seizures and water just really don't go together. And his brother is a diver, and you know, he wanted to do it too, but that's not in his cards, because he's got that as well.
Wow. It's so much information to take on. And honestly, like, I'm just a little emotional about it for whatever reason. Like, it's, there's just already so much as a parent that you have to, you know, work through and understand. And then, you know, this layer added on top. I just really, it seems silly to say, like, I commend you, but like, you've gotten out there, you figured it out, you were an advocate. Like, I just, you know, from one.
Well, you know, I know, yeah, you're right. I mean, I work with, you know, countless numbers of families with kids with all kinds of very complex needs, not just autism, it could be anything. And yeah, I mean, we got to worry about our doctors giving us what we want. I mean, some people, they struggle with just getting their kid a haircut. And that's a traumatic event. Haircuts, dentists, they got to go to a dentist that will sedate them to get dental care. I mean, yeah. So, and then school, I mean, there's so many things, but the beauty about what we're talking about today though is, for one, if you get your kids swimming lessons, they can, like I said, they could be amazing swimmers. So that's number one. The other thing is that they can develop relationships there. And I know kids with autism that literally never get invited to a birthday party, like ever, their whole life. They don't get invited. And so it gives them access to not only, you know, peers in their program, or they join a swim team, because a lot of them will end up on a swim team because they become that good, they get on a swim team. And so then they have peers that they can hang out with. And you know, for many of them, they're told every day, all day at school, what they can't do. You can't read, you're not on grade level, this is hard, that's hard, oh, you can't write your name even. I mean, it's just this constant barrage of what they can't do. And so swimming gives them the opportunity to do something that they're better than the other kids at. They can swim faster, they can hold their breath longer, they can do these flippy things that, like, the average kid is like, oh, that looks way too scary, I'm not doing that. And so there could be so much joy for them and enjoyment in water. But the first thing that we have to do as parents and other caregivers is make sure that they are safe. And so that means getting them swimming lessons so that hopefully they can get to that. They can, you know, I encourage a lot of these pools when I train the swim instructors to have a birthday swim, you know, because everybody likes a birthday swim. It doesn't matter if you have autism or you don't, you can do like this birthday swim, because that might be the only birthday party that kid gets invited to, or it's their birthday and where maybe the other kids from class, they maybe show up, maybe they don't show up. But when it's a birthday swim,
Yeah.
I mean, who would want to go to a birthday swim? That sounds pretty awesome. And so it's a really beautiful celebration, not only of their birthday, but of their skills and abilities. And then the one other thing is that a lot of kids with autism, they don't like the heat. So they just don't want to be outside running around. It's too hot, and their sensory system just doesn't like all that heat and sweat and all that stuff your body does when it gets hot. So they don't get enough exercise. Lots of them are on medication, and one of the biggest side effects of medication is weight gain. And so by swimming, you're doing something that you love. You're not hot. It's helping you get in shape. And hopefully, it'll balance out your weight a little bit, makes you physically stronger. It gives you more coordination, which is another thing kids with autism struggle with. You tend to be all sort of like, where's my arms and my legs? Oh, wait, you get coordinated here. And so the benefits of it is amazing, but you only get to that if you engage in safe swimming and getting what you need so that you can get to that point.
So amazing.
It is incredible.
Thank you so much. Like, this was so informative, and just even a reminder, like, that's the birthday swim. It's a reminder to be inclusive, like, and reach out to those parents that, their kids might be having a hard time. So it's just all a good reminder, and great tips as well. So,
well, and yesterday when I was speaking, it was a very large crowd that I was speaking to yesterday. And I started off by saying, who in here knows somebody with autism? So a kid, an adult, and I'll say maybe almost 3/4 of the room. So it was a lot. And I said, and any of you people in here that didn't raise your hand, I bet you do. You just don't know that you do. Because with 1 in 44 children today affected by autism, and again, that's conservative, that's just based on these 11 reporting spots across the United States. I mean, we know there's states like New Jersey, some like just in Houston, even astronomical amounts of kids with autism. And, the scientists are studying why that is exactly, but it is real. And so you're hard to find a teacher anymore who doesn't have a kid on the spectrum in her class. And again, sometimes they don't know it. And I was telling these guys and gals yesterday, even though I encourage parents not to do this, and so if you guys are watching, I encourage you not to do this, but at this time of year, they always tell me, oh, I'm going to put my kid in camp or swimming lessons or whatever, coming up now, and I'm not going to tell them that he or she has autism. And I'm like, why are you going to do that? And I want to see if they could tell. And there's nothing good about that. There's just nothing. But they think that, and then, I mean, a bad thing that can happen is then they don't really think, they don't know that they have to keep an extra eye on your kid. Mm-hmm. And so, that could be a very dangerous situation. And, and if you're afraid that they're going to have this stigma in their mind, they're not going to want your kid, then that's probably not the swing lesson place for you or the camp place for you. Right. So, you shouldn't want them if they don't want you. And, but there's nothing good. I've been an advocate for 22 years. I have never heard a good outcome over, I'm not telling them. It's going to be a secret.
So that's another takeaway tip for the talk.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Wow.
And anybody is, if anybody wants to shoot me an email, you can do that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or give you any guidance that I can.
Thank you, Thank you so much, Stacey. I'll put, when we share this on YouTube, I will put the Autism Society of Florida information and let them know that they can find you that way. And because there's a lot of amazing, I have it on my other screen right here. There's a lot of amazing stuff on their website. So I'll be sure to share that. And it is wonderful how there are more and more resources now, but it's just about continuing that conversation. And for us, it's the conversation of autism within the realm of water, and just having these opportunities like this to speak with you and hear not only your personal experiences with it within your family, but what you've seen and the trends and how we can continue to support that. And as No More Under, we are just this year facilitating numerous Learn to Swim programs, and a big part of what we're addressing is the financial barrier. But as we continue to expand, you know, we have big goals, and we are working right now with only children and neurotypical children, because that is what the instructors have capacity to support right now. But we want to be supporting everyone, not just kids, because there are adults that can't swim, not just neurotypical children, because other children need lessons too. And so it's a place where there's so much growth to happen, and we're excited to be a part of it and to get to speak to amazing people like you and your Autism Society. So thank you so much for your time. It is, yeah, it's really beautiful. So thank you.
Well, and we're definitely getting more attention. You know, we now have this national committee, and so it's moving. And about, you know, just like with everything, we have to be out there. We have to have a voice. We have to expose, and you guys need to share your stories.
Right.
That's what motivates legislators to do what they are supposed to do, right? So, but it was my pleasure to be here with you ladies. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Stacey.